Over to you, Sylvia.
Okay. So thank you, Carol, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Catherine. So just the protocol of the webinar is that when we let in the people, we're just going to do a word of prayer and then we continue. So let's give Daktari time for people to join, then we can start the webinar. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for creating time to join this webinar today. My name, as usual, is Sylvia Kamau. So, I'm giving around like 3 minutes for people to join. And then from there, we will start with a word of prayer from myself. And I will invite the moderator of the day who will invite the speakers, and we can go forward with the topic of the day. And the topic of the day is addiction, which is a family disease. And before, as we wait for people to join in, these webinars are powered by Family Wellness Center, which is a wellness center that is in Naivasha, the physical location, whereby we offer different services for just creating the well-being of a person and even a family at large. It is also powered by BTI. BTI is Bomber Training Institute, whereby we give different courses. And even as we are talking right now, there's a course ongoing which is about professional mediation that is going on. So you're taught about mediating at a personal level. You can offer those services. So, and the chair or the person behind all this is Dr. Kimani Githongo, who has been our speaker in our previous webinars, and he has really shared a lot of energy and a lot of knowledge to us as the members. And today I'm very well privileged to have a new team which is coming in to talk about the addiction part of it, which is a family disease. So I think without just further ado, and because of time, I would want us to we start first of all with the word of prayer, then we can proceed. So kindly let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you this wonderful evening. We thank you so much for the grace and the gift of life up to seeing this wonderful evening. We thank you for all your mercies upon us, and even thank you for this opportunity that we are here to learn about addiction, which is a family disease. As we learn and get knowledge from our speakers, we ask you that you may help us, that we may implement whatever knowledge we're going to get into our daily lives. And at the end of the day, we may become better people in this family and at large in our society. We thank you for this opportunity, and every participant here, every speaker, every moderator, we thank you for them. How we pray that this will be an insightful session, and may you take the lead in everything. We thank you and we glorify your holy name. For it is in Jesus' name I pray, believing and trusting. Amen.
Amen.
Without further ado, thank you, Catherine. So I would want to welcome the moderator of the day, who is Catherine Mutiani. Catherine Mutiani is a counseling psychologist. She's also a training manager at SAPTA, and she's also a mental health practitioner and trainer, and currently serving as the deputy director, ISSUP in Kenya. So I would want to welcome her. She's the one who is going to introduce the speakers of the day, and we can take the session as we always do. Thank you all participants for joining, and I hope that we will all enjoy. Let's keep this webinar lively. And in case you have any questions as the webinar is proceeding, kindly put it under the chat box. The moderator is going to indulge with our speakers, and at the end of the day, we are going to answer your question. Thank you all, and I enjoy. Kindly, Catherine, take the lead.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Good evening, everybody, those who are joining in this time zone, and for others who could be joining from other time zones. Good morning or good afternoon. As you've heard, I'm Catherine Modiani. And I will be moderating this very wonderful session that we are hoping to have this evening. I feel like me doing the introduction of the speakers of today, I'll not be doing justice to them. So allow me just to invite them to introduce themselves. Allow me to invite first Chris to introduce yourself, and then from Chris we'll move on to Caroline.
Okay. I was expecting to be introduced, but that's fine. I wear many hats when I sit here today, but who Chris is a believer in second chances, and numerous second chances for everybody. And in terms of what I do for a living, I'm a counseling psychologist and an addictions interventionist. I'm also a certified professional mediator. And I'm a husband of one, a father of one, and also, for the sake of this webinar, I think it's important to just say I'm a happy recovering alcoholic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. You see, I would not have said that you're a believer of second chances or even talked about your family. So thank you very much for even bringing that helps in point straight to some of the conversations that we shall be having today. Over to you, Caroline.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be on this platform. Catherine, it's good to see you. I must point out, Catherine was my lecturer at SAPTA. She did a brilliant job on me. So good to see you here. I am an addictions therapist. As of yesterday, I am a certified professional mediator. I am a speaker, a wellness and a recovery coach, and I'm also in recovery from alcohol use disorder.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and congratulations on your certification as a mediator. Welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, to this conversation in the evening, where we are talking about addiction, a family disease. We know the family as the basic unit of the society. So if we are having the family that is sick, then that translates to us having a sick society. So when you're talking about addiction, thinking about dynamics within the family, thinking about many cases of divorces that may have happened within the family that could be contributed by the addiction. But let me not take the stage. Let me invite Chris to tell us really, how is addiction a family disease? Chris, you're muted.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Excellent question, and not an easy one. I suppose basically is because it's an impairment, and like you said, family is a basic unit of society, and therefore, when one person gets sick, even if it's not just addiction, every person in that basic unit of society is affected. And the way they are affected is that it's not like, for instance, if for instance, a family member is hit by a car and they break a leg, you take them to hospital, but they're the ones, yes, you'll take care of them, but when they heal, and everybody is okay. But with addiction, and for this webinar, I'm also going to interchange addiction and alcoholism, because for me, they present similarly, and other substances and behaviors. Yeah, so that in that sense, why it becomes a family illness is that when one person gets it, the whole family is affected in one way or another.
Thank you, Chris, and probably piggybacking on your experience, because you've disclosed to us that you are also a person in recovery. When you're looking at your own experience when you're in active use, would you say that your family was impacted, and would say that you're not just the only one who was sick? Maybe you can loop in your experience and just expound the point to us a little bit more.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, just to note that I'm in long-term sobriety. So, there might be some people on this show, on this webinar, who were born when I had already stopped drinking, but it doesn't matter. Yes, I started, drinking at home, and as an adolescent, and obviously we thought it was thought both at home and generally the environment I found myself in, that it was normal. I was in Nairobi, my classmates in high school, they drank, there was all these functions that we went to. And at that time, the law was not as strict as it is. Yes, we knew that many places, would say under 18 not to be served, but it didn't matter. At that time, for some reason, it didn't, we could get away with it. So by the time I got sober, there was an expectation that my family would, well done, well done, well done. And they'll, write me blank checks and say, yeah, just go and do, now that you've stopped. It's only many years later that I could get to understand, because when I sobered up, internet was not there, and there wasn't as much information and understanding about alcoholism and addiction as there is now. Excuse me. So at the time, how I know they were affected is because the my approval ratings did not go up. I didn't get those blank checks. In fact, if anything, there was a bit more suspicion about who I was and where, in the context in which I went to, I got my recovery, because I was, I often share about an auntie of mine who used to tell me that people like me in the olden days, because of my behavior as an active alcoholic, what they used to be done, you're thrown to the edge of the forest where either another tribe will pick you, or you'll be eaten by hyenas. So a tribe picked me, and they walked with me. They told me they'll love me until I learn to love myself. And I was baffled, about my family not being welcoming. Later, now I understand from from lived experience, but also from my training, that the way I recovered, it was kind of just me, who'd walked that journey. So my family caught up much, much, much later. And in that catching up, initially, when other people would say they had family support in early recovery, or when they come to rehabilitation centers, because I've also worked, I'd be very suspicious, because I didn't think family support was a thing. But now, in the nature of my work, that's what, especially as an interventionist, my work is to bring everybody on board to start that journey of recovery together.
Thank you very much, Chris, for just, connecting that when you're affected by the disease of addiction, that likely your family can also be affected. But at times, the family may not see that. And when you make the change, they may not even notice the change. If you're noticing or you're changing to be a good child, a good boy, waiting for appraisal and affirmation, not getting that. So the family is kind of left behind, and that kind of telling us it's necessary for families to understand that when they have their loved ones struggling with addiction and they make changes, as a source of motivation, the affected person may look into the family for support, may look into the family for affirmation. But when that affirmation is not there, in a way, may have negative impact. But lucky for you, you had some extra support outside from the family. Let me also invite Caroline, because again, she's also mentioned that she is in recovery, to kind of also help us connect. How is it really a family disease, and how was it for you? Was it a similar case with Chris's case, or was your experience a bit different?
Thank you. For me, yes, addiction is really a family disease. Like we say, it's not a spectator sport. If you're not infected, you're affected. for me, more so considering my background, having been literally born and raised in the church, coming from a background that, you know, alcohol and drugs and everything that accompanies it is wrong. And then I'm also the firstborn. And somehow I find myself caught up in this disease, which really many people don't think is a disease, that some people think we bring it onto ourselves. So finding myself caught up in this thing and later realizing the ripple effect it had on not only my parents, but also on my children. And now having, I really support the notion that truly it is a family disease. And more so from the point of view of a female, having struggled with it for 2 decades, and being a mom also, it hits differently than the way it hits a man, because the woman is ideally the cornerstone of the family. And so if a mother does not have it together, 99% chance is that that family will fall apart. And so having struggled with this thing and then going to rehab the first time voluntarily, then the second time, 2 years later, I went in involuntarily. It affected my kids greatly, more so my son. Recovery journey, because after my relapse now, I came out of relapse and got into now active sobriety. So I'm in my 5th sobriety. I know all too well that if as a female who is in recovery, I do not get it together, then it will ripple down to my children. I want to point out that my parents have been my biggest supporter in this journey, even after all the theatrics that come with alcohol use disorder, you know, the lying, the stealing, the manipulation. I think they are part of the cornerstone as to why I have been able to walk steadfastly and consistently and deliberately in this journey. And there are probably a lot of parents or significant others of people who are struggling on this platform, and they're wondering, how do I help my loved one who seems to be stuck in this rut? I like to encourage them by saying, don't give up on your loved one who is caught up in addiction. Me, I had been written off by so many people. But somebody like my dad was very instrumental and very key in my recovery journey. He refused to give up. So you always need that one person who is on your corner, pushing you forward, encouraging you that you can make it, encouraging you that this current status of your life is not the best definition of you yet. And so it's never over. It's not over until you win. And even for the family, there's a lot of doubt that creeps in. I remember when I came out of rehab, I mean, like the first time, doors used to be locked, because me, I was very good at pilfering coins. So doors used to be locked, and then you're given these hugs, and you kind of know they're not genuine. Someone is hugging you to know if you're smelling of something you should not be smelling of. Some of these things happen in the path of recovery, but the reason we also say that addiction is a family disease is because even they are affected. When you are not sleeping home, they didn't know where you are, your phone is off. When probably you've been caught up in trouble somewhere, they don't know how to get you out, they're affected. And so, yeah, I agree with the notion that addiction is a family disease, but just as I am in recovery, my family is also in recovery, and together we walk this journey and we shall succeed.
Thank you very much, Carol, for that addition. And like in Chris's case, you had and you've continually had the family support, but you brought in some very important gender dynamics that happens when addiction gets into the family, especially when the woman is affected. You talked about, you know, in your active use, how your children were when you've gone into treatment, how your children were, and just showing that addiction hits differently when it hits a woman who has an addiction problem. And there is also something that you have said. You're in recovery, but your family is also in recovery. How was your dad, or how did your use impact your dad? How did it impact your children? How did it impact your parent? Owing to the fact that you're saying you are the firstborn, raised in a Christian home, what was the impact on that particular family to really make it that it's not just Carol who is sick, but the whole family is also sick?
Look at it this way. You're the firstborn in a family. You're the one who is supposed to be leading the path for the others who are behind. And so I have been privileged to go to very good schools. Did my Form 5 and my Form 6, my A-levels here, left the country to go and study overseas to do a degree in advertising, multimedia, and broadcasting. So all eyes are literally on Caro, who is the door opener for the rest, because I have 4 siblings behind me. But unknown to all of us, including myself, I am struggling with this thing called alcohol use disorder because I started drinking at the age of 19. I started drinking and smoking at the age of 19. And it was supposed to be fun because we all go through that experimental stage at the initial of any kind of addiction, by the way, alcohol, drugs, porn, gambling, name it, whatever kind of addiction, we all go through the experimental stage. And it is at that stage we decide whether we are going to continue with this thing or we don't like it. But my choice to continue was also pegged onto my lack of self-awareness, my very poor self-esteem. And so poor self-esteem ties with people pleasing. And so here I am in Form 5. I have joined a school that is multicultural. I come from a very conservative family. Here I'm finding kids who are used to different kinds of lifestyles. Here I'm finding kids who smoke with lecturers during the smoke break. They talk about alcohol and sex freely. And for me, this is new. This is culture shock, okay? And so I find myself doing a lot of stuff that I ordinarily would not have done, maybe if I had not gone into such a background for studies. And so in the course of my addiction, because my story is very long, I mean, I did crazy stuff. I stole. I was sent overseas to buy stuff. I come back, and because I'm broke, I sell it off to Shylock. So ordinarily, the family cannot understand what is going on with their child. And you see, unfortunately, many people think that somebody becomes an alcoholic overnight. Somebody becomes a drug user overnight. Somebody becomes a gambler overnight. There is nothing in this life. Very few things happen in this life overnight. Everything takes progression. And so for me, with my toying around with alcohol from the age of 19, little did I know that it would become something that would escalate to something that was almost beyond me. So my mother gets unwell because she can't understand what's going on with her daughter. I am the talk of the church because me, I loved Jesus from a very young age, from the age of 10. I had always loved Jesus, but I was still struggling with this thing later in life. And so nobody understands it. And so many families, they try to hide, especially their female children who are struggling with this thing. My family was different. We had to speak about it at some point, but it becomes more of a family disease, especially when you get to this point where a family is trying to hide that their daughter has an addiction problem. And yet everybody around can see that Shiro, sorry for the use of the word, is not okay. Shiro seems to be struggling with something, but her family can't seem to talk about it. Why? Because of the shame and the stigma. And I think everybody on this platform knows that what you cannot talk about has a way of crippling you, either emotionally, spiritually, mentally, in one way or another. And that's why we call it a disease, because it is hidden, but at some point it comes out. Okay, so I've done a lot of things in addiction that I'm not proud of, but I like to encourage people and tell people, imagine there's always a turnaround. You better believe it. If I'm here on this platform telling you there's a turnaround, considering alcohol use past, there is a turnaround for everyone, particularly for women. I ran an initiative called Caroline Kagia Wellness Initiative, which was birthed out of my own personal struggle as a woman, because I understand the intricacies of alcoholism amongst women. And it's so sad that we don't talk about it in Africa. And yet the fact of the matter is a lot of women are drinking now, especially post-COVID. And how it affects women has more impact than in the ways it affects men. For example, at a time when I was so deep in it, I missed my menses for a whole year. Yeah.
Probably allow me to hold on to that, and you probably give us more details as we talk about specific impact on women, and get to invite Chris. From your sharing is that one of the ways the family gets to be impacted is the issue of stigma. It's like it erodes dignity on the family when they have their loved one who is using, and the keeping quiet makes the situation worse by the nature of addiction being something that eventually finds its way out. And that talk of town will still find its way to have more people talk about. And you mentioned about your mom also getting sick, medical issues out of the worry, the anxiety, wondering, where is my daughter? What is the next thing that would happen? The next call that is gonna come, what will it be about? When you talk of being a firstborn for many of the families, people look at them as being role models. So it's like already you're setting up a model of failing the family. And that in most cases, you may also find family members comparing you with some younger people who are successful, and even starting to give you names. And that, in a way, may push the loved one who is already having the addiction deeper into it, because they are seeing now themselves, they are not setting a good example for their loved significant others. Let me invite Chris. You mentioned about addiction being progressive and it doesn't happen all at once. And as we are talking about conversation in the family, it's also important for our audience to get to appreciate what is that progression of addiction like. And as the person is progressing in the addiction, are there some things that family members can do without knowing, thinking that they are protecting their loved one from developing addiction, that is actually contributing to that progression and contributing to that addiction?
Yes, and it starts, yeah, great question, in the sense that, let me give a simplified definition of addiction that I usually work with, that makes, for me, even when I heard it, I said, oh, this makes so much sense. It's a use of a behavior, use of a substance or engaging in a behavior with negative consequences to meet a legitimate need. The use of a substance or engaging in a behavior with negative consequences to meet a legitimate need. Now, those things, because we are all broken with no one left out, all of us, that means this stuff, what family do to maybe, in trigger, addictive behaviors in other family members can start from birth. For instance, like this thing of birth order. I do get, that modeling, for me, I just hear pressure. Sango, I'm a last-ish born, kind of, because I was born a twin, and we were the last borns. So, and I was older than my twin sister by half an hour. I don't know whether that counts. But that pressure, already can trigger, perfectionism, for instance, that because I'm a firstborn, I must show up clean, I must show up well, I must show up, and yet we are all imperfect. So there's anything, so like now for me, I suppose like being in primary, primary school was not too hard. And, so there was this thing about being number one that was not I didn't work for it. And then I go to high school and I think it's the same, MO, that I just go to class and I'll be number one. Then now there's real competition and I'm not studying. I'm not, because I'm not even come from a place, a background of regular studying, because it was this thing of, if you get homework on Friday, you finish it in school and I don't have to. But in high school, you're getting the weekend homework, and I only realized much, much later that you actually, when you start working on it at 9 p.m. on Sunday, it doesn't quite work. Then I start feeling afraid about being caught tomorrow. So, but when I started drinking, for me, when I started drinking, there were so many things that it quietened. Not solved, but it seemed like a solution at the time. But they quietened because only boy in a female, an all-female household. Then there was these messages I was getting about boys, but from non-boys, if there's a thing like that, from non-boys. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know what it takes to be a boy. Socializing outside, I would not play with the boys because I felt they were really kind of rough. And so there's also an impact on my sexuality. I don't miss my adolescence. I don't miss my childhood because it was just a time of confusion and no affirmation, even no clarifying of things. So when I started drinking, for me, the questions just quietened. But where did these questions arise from? My environment. Yeah. So there's just people being in their normal way of being. I think it can be triggered because I don't think anybody intentionally lead people. That's why even like now I say for family, parenting, for instance, intentional parenting starts at day 0 or day 1, so that you don't wait for this child to start talking, then now that's when you start parenting. No, it starts from, so being intentional about bringing that up. So when we are not intentional, I promise you, things will happen.
Thank you very much, Chris. So from what you're sharing about your experiences is to tell us within families, some of the ways in which being parents, that we can miss out on our kids developing addiction is what environment are they finding themselves in. So being well attuned with the kind of spaces that we are allowing our kids to be, and at the same time appreciating some of the challenges that they may go through. Because you talked about needing to quiet some voices, needing to calm some things, some stormy things. You mentioned about not learning or not knowing how to be a boy, growing up in an environment of it's all girls. So what challenge would you really throw, or what kind of insights can you give to parents, mothers, when they have sons and it's an all girls environment, and how such dynamics may impact a young person into getting to using drugs as a way of wanting to fit in, or even as a way of coping because they are feeling inadequate?
Yeah. Consider we invest so much in so many things. We go to school, we do, a first degree, a second degree, tertiary degrees. People go for postdoc. We invest so much in nowadays, getting married. We go for premarital counseling. We go for, classes, marriage and enrichment. We go for even when we're doing a sport, if we're learning a new sport, we go for coaching, we go for training, we do a lot of personal development. But parenting, it seems a very new phenomenon that now there's a lot of write-up, there are classes for it. I know with my son when he was 10, that's when I went for a parenting class, and it changed our relationship, not necessarily for the better, but for the consciously. So like if it's for girls, I still think, even if it's a single parent household, bring in the opposite gender, in a healthy way, have father figures. For me, it was a single parent household, no brothers, no male figures. And even in my big age, still trying to adjust to relating to an authority figure who is male. Like now, I have a father-in-law, and I only had, for the first time in my life, I called somebody dad at 44. You can imagine that awkwardness. And so and then for boys, also, yes, have them, I remember one example. When my son went for the rites of passage, so the kind of system they went, I was not involved, so you hand him over for 2 weeks. Then when he comes, we go for the graduation, and something caught me in terms of the graduation, because it was, there was the girls and then there was the guys. So the guys were taught how to slaughter chicken, I think how to, roast meat and everything. Then I heard that the girls were shown how to wash clothes and how to keep a house clean. And I said, but that even should have been done for my son. Yeah. So these stereotypes that we come with into the world, into our conversations. There's so many stereotypes that we have that we don't even relate to them as stereotypes, but we think they are the truth. And some of them are damaging. For me, I did not know what to do about being a man. There are many things I've discovered in recovery, and thank God for recovery, because why it's not a linear process. It doesn't seem to have an end or a graduation, and I'm still learning, getting to understand sexuality, getting to understand matters of, even for me as a citizen, for me as a brother, for me as a son, for me as a boyfriend, for me as, even getting married at 44, I was 17 years in recovery, but there was still stuff to learn. So I think coming into parenting also as a learning process, not the way we were told, do this. Why? Because I said so. That doesn't work. And that's what even got the Gen Zs going to the streets the other day. It doesn't work. Nowadays, you need to explain, and you need to be understood and heard when you're explaining. So, and there are ways of doing that in conversation, like now we are having this conversation. So, I think this is stuff that if it was hard, say 35 years ago, perhaps I'd not be in this webinar as a participant.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no regrets. Having said that, there are no regrets.
Thank you so much, Chris, using yourself as an example and highlighting the importance of parenting, the relationship, the intentional relationship that a parent creates with the child, which gives also an opportunity for the child to know what is going on. There's something that you have mentioned that I also want you to expound it a bit, because in my practice, I've also met a couple of men who got into addiction, and the issue of identity, the issue of, sex role and just how to be a man is a troubling thing for them. You've mentioned you called someone dad at the age of 44. How is that significant in contributing to male addiction or male substance use, or even engaging in some behaviors that people may see as not so healthy? Identity and substance use.
And when the definition about meeting a legitimate need, owning your life, knowing yourself is a very legitimate need. Belonging is a legitimate need. Even when we talk about the hierarchy of needs, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So belonging, being accepted, being acknowledged, being loved, connecting with another human being, these are legitimate needs. And for children, parents are the first stop of doing that, of providing for that need, and then now goes to schooling, and then we expand it to the rest of society. Now, when that's missing at home, the child will start looking for it in school, and because it was not given at home, it creates problems at school, like where, like when even just a standard 2, okay, I don't know whether it's, grade 2, when you're doing homework, when they're doing their homework, and then you're teaching them how to do the homework different from the way they were taught. They said, lakini teacher si alisema. So my job as a parent is not to discount what the teacher is saying, or, saying, but I am your father, listen to me, I'm the one who pays your school fees. So you don't do things like that. So you work in tandem, understanding the way they are being taught in school. But I remember, I think in our time, there was this thing of giving, substituting our parental responsibilities to the schools, to teachers, because so that I can go get money for, to put food on the table and to pay for school fees and that kind of thing. So, and I confess, I forget the question, but I hope I'm answering it. But yeah, so that socialization process needs to be, so like for me as a teenager, I did not know that feeling awkward about myself was normal as a teenager. I thought I was alone. That the fact that I did not know how, the word we used at the time, how to tune a girl, that it's a normal awkwardness, that we have to still go through it. Yes, be rejected and then come back home and say, oh, she didn't like me. Now I hear they're ghosting and this kind of thing. But get a place of solace at home. And that's why I'm saying that needs to start from age 0.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, you in a way answered the question by identifying what is this need that this person, this child, this individual has that they are looking at to meet. And sometimes when they don't get to have the need met, finding the need being met by specific drugs, but then again, also the emphasis of, as parents, connecting with what is going on in the child's life in order to minimize not just about addiction, because our conversation is on addiction, but also having a well-centered, grounded child. Let me invite Caroline, because we are speaking, if the parents don't have the parenting skills, if the home environment, the need is not met for the person, they are likely to have that need met somewhere else. And Carol, maybe you can chime in and let us know, are there some ways in which families can contribute to addiction? Are there some things that as families that we can look in our own patterns that we can say that this is likely to cause addiction? In short, what are the ways in which families contribute to addiction?
Is this in relation to somebody who is already struggling or in relation to what?
All round. Somebody struggling, somebody before they enter into addiction, or even somebody when they have back from treatment.
Okay. The first thing I would say leads to addiction is lack of affirmation. I always encourage parents to affirm their children. What do I mean by affirming your child? Tell your child they're beautiful. Tell your son he's handsome. Tell your children that you love them. Simple things that are not so simple. Hug your children. Love on your children. Be friends with your children from the time they are children. The problem with a lot of us parents is we grew up in circumstances whereby we were never given this sort of affirmation. And so we grew up sort of emotionally handicapped, for lack of a better word. And here come our children, and the same cycle repeats itself. So lack of affirmation is one of the things that can lead a child to getting into addiction or to becoming socially or emotionally handicapped at some point. There's also this thing parents do of comparing their children. One child, they say there's always one child who is loved more than the other. I don't know how true that is. And so as a child, you grow up feeling I'm not as appreciated. Maybe I'm not as bright as another one. I'm not as beautiful. I'm not as acceptable as my other siblings. And so you choose subconsciously to become the rebel of that family. And so you end up going against the grain, doing things that as a family we do not do. But this child becomes the black sheep of the family. That is another thing that leads to people getting into addiction. And then also just the fact that you come from a dysfunctional family can cause anybody to get into addiction. And addictions, like I've said, can be many kinds. Some addictions are either chemical addictions, which are alcohol and drugs, substances, or the process addictions like porn, masturbation, gambling, overeating. all these addictions can be caused as a result of something that happened in upbringing. Some of these addictions also happen in adulthood, even in the family dynamics, the family setting. Some addictions pick up in adulthood. There could be anything. The reasons could be so many, but you need to understand your family dynamics. Like me, I really had to sit down to understand, who am I? Where have I come from? What is it about? Could it be something about my family that triggered me to get into addiction? Or was it just a genetic predisposition? I used to think it's a genetic predisposition until after sitting down and going through my genogram, I discovered, no, we do not have the genetic predisposition. Unfortunately, some things cannot really be explained, but I don't know if I've gone off the radar and if I've answered the question, but I think there are many things. There's a myriad of things or reasons that can cause somebody to get addicted.
Thanks, Kara. I feel like pretty much you've taken the direction of, identifying core basic human beings, the need for validation, the need for affirmation, and you don't get that in the family. People may seek it outside from somebody else. As you're talking about connect with your child, give hugs. I'm wondering, what if this is an adult son? This is an adult daughter that has an addiction, and now at the point of how the family may be perpetuating this, or the family could do something to stop that. What are the family members supposed to do? Caro, are you still there? Caro?
Sorry, I got disconnected. Say that again, please.
Yes, so I was asking, you have given us wonderful illustrations, especially when it comes to children, in ways in which families may contribute when affirmations are lacking, when there is comparison of children. How about in a situation now here we are looking at, it's not just about children. Let's say this is a family, it's a married couple. What are some of the things within that family that may contribute into using?
For a family setting where we are dealing with grown-ups, it could be anything. The loss of a job, a relationship gone sour, finances have gone south. And you as an adult, you have not grown up knowing how to handle difficulties in life. You've not known how to handle things that are probably beyond you. And this more so happens for men. You had a good job, it has gone south. You had good finances, your monies are not making sense anymore. And so now, because men are not wired to speak about their issues, what do you get onto? The nearest thing that will give you some sort of release and relief. And so you get hooked onto alcohol, or you get, most likely, most of the times, it's you get hooked onto alcohol because you use it as an emotional crutch. And unfortunately, this emotional crutch becomes almost a permanent thing, because even the little money that you had left, now you're using it for your drug of choice. And so the dynamics of addiction, in short, are very broad. It can start at any stage, but most of the times, most of the addictions that we see happen from childhood. But I always think it's easier to deal with addictions that have begun in adulthood than the ones that have begun in childhood, and more so those that began from a tender age, because we are told that the brain stops growing at the age of 24. We stop growing at the age of 24. And so for those who become addicted to alcohol and substances, or to behavioral addictions before the age of 24, it becomes a bit harder to deal with them from my line of work. And it becomes a bit difficult to treat them than it is to treat people who have begun using alcohol and drugs in their latter years. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Caro. Identifying the issue of brain development and how that when people start using early increases their likelihood of losing their sense of control, which primarily in looking at addiction is what many people use, leading them to the compulsivity of their substance use. There's something that you mentioned about looking at your addiction and trying to look at your family genogram to understand whether the addiction emanated from there. Maybe it's important to help us know, how was that relevant? Should families look at their family history, their family tree, in identifying addiction and related problems?
For me, I decided to look into my genogram because I was very intentional on becoming sober and sober. And I did my genogram literally until the 4th generation. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, actually up to my great-great-grandfather. And I discover none of these men or their women, their wives, drank alcohol. My paternal grandparents never drank alcohol. My mother's dad, my maternal grandpa, drank a bit, but he was not an alcoholic. And so I looked at my great-grandparents, I looked at my uncles, and I saw, yes, there are a few who are struggling with it, but it was not enough to make me say that there is that predisposition in our family. And so I had to come to the conclusion that for me, it was tied to other things. For example, childhood trauma. I talk a bit about that. I've talked about a bit about that, on several occasions in different platforms. Also, my lack of self-esteem, my very poor self-esteem, my lack of understanding who I am led me to get into something that would probably have killed me, but by the mercies of God, I'm alive. So I always think it's important for people to do their genogram. Is there that, was your father or your mother, do they have an alcohol use disorder? Are you an adult child of an alcoholic? Because those are the ones who struggle a lot with this thing. They're called ACOAs, adult children of alcoholics. Are you an adult child of an alcoholic? And as a result of you being an adult child of an alcoholic, are you struggling with the same addiction that your parents have struggled with? Do your uncles have it, your aunties, your grandfathers, your grandmothers? Do your genogram. Be deliberate to find out, is there a cycle? Is there a pattern of this thing in your family? And if there is, and you currently are on this platform and you're watching us, Chris and I, are you suffering with the same and you want to break this cycle? That normally is the starting point to breaking any pattern in your life. Look back as far as you can, ask as many questions as you can. And for me, Catherine, I was so liberated. I was so liberated when I did my genogram and discovered this thing is actually not in the family. It's not genetic. So then I said, if it is not genetic, thank God I canceled that box. What else could have led to me becoming an alcoholic for 20 solid years? And then my recovery journey began from there.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Carol. So just understanding your roots can give you a kind of freedom to know that it's not about the genetics, but it's something that you can work on. But we have cases where people may find that it's a genetic predisposition. So that tells them that them and other people within the family will be at risk of developing addiction. So either way, it gives people an opportunity to choose and also to put more effort in working at the addiction problem if it is there. Thank you. Allow me to invite Chris. And Chris, when you're telling us about addiction being a family disease, you mentioned it being a family operating like a system. You even gave us an analogy of a car. Meaning that if one tire has burst, the car has to adjust to having, a burst out tire. Maybe you can tell us, when addiction comes in the family, what are some of the ways in which the family adjust to accommodate that addiction, to keep the car going?
Well, yeah, there are many things they can do. They can isolate the addict and move on with their lives. They could also stop, operating as a family. They could now start reduce on their social engagement because they don't want, to be said, look at those people. You know how people, that thing of kind of, well, those are the people of, of so and so. Yeah, so they can do a lot of stuff, and even different family members could react differently. They could get out of that car and enter another one. Yeah, or they could go, but others will say, let me go back to where this family started. And by that, I mean, they could start, working on themselves. Others, depending on their relationship, others could just move out, of home. Like one of the things I did not like about my elder sister is that one of the things she would tell me, and of course, it didn't make sense at the time, because every time I mess up, I come, I say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Then she would tell me, no, just don't do it again. Then you don't have to say you're sorry again. And God knows how much I wanted to do that. But, I really, really was sincere that I didn't want to have to come and say I'm sorry again. And I always remembered that. And one of the things, when I messed up again, she just moved out. Yeah, and she moved out to a place where was not accessible by public means. We didn't have Ubers or whatever then at that time. So, and we had no phones. So to get to see her, it was, you either call the workplace, but I didn't like that because part of my misery was for sharing. Yeah, it was for sharing. So she got out of that car. I suppose my mother, being my mother, trudged along on the three wheels. She trudged along, you get either a second hand, but, you just do anything. And she got a lot of flack from her friends. She said, why don't you just leave this guy alone? I don't know why she stuck it out. I don't think it's because she's a mother, because even in my experience as a practitioner, I've seen mothers abandoning their kids. So I don't know what that's about. But like that, I like that word called a mystery. And one of the things that I don't, yeah, so that's what people do. Or even some people, I've known some people join the addict. They say, okay, kama ni mbaya, kufa makanga, kufa dereva. So they join the bandwagon of saying, let's just cope. Yeah, because remember, if we are if it's a family disease, that means even the family is into the addiction in some way, and therefore also meeting a legit need despite negative consequences. And one of the needs the family is trying to meet is to lessen the frustration, to lessen the drama, yeah. But one other thing about the adult stage, again, it's not just family, like right now, Kenya is a very difficult place to be. I feel, this is my personal opinion, that it's difficult being a Kenyan. And because of that, that can trigger, an inability, especially like, let me say for men, because they might think there's this thing we are told about providing. And if he has an ability to provide and he's a man, then he thinks it's his fault. And when we're even when we're saying it's biopsychosocial, spiritual, the social part usually is understated because there's sometimes this person really, really, really had no choice in them, had no say. So they do get, and I like the idea, the fact that when I discovered that not all addiction is genetic, because that was the theme when I came into recovery, that was the theme. So yes, genograms help give history and, that pattern finding that it's not so much even, I mean, it's additional to looking for addiction, but also you could look for the risk factors. Where somebody like may have there was a string of suicide, and suicidal ideation in and of itself can trigger addiction, because I don't know what to do. What's on the other end of the suicide? What's life like this? I feel like a zombie. My life is not working right now. The faith, the noise in the faith world is saying that it's that I will it will be eternal fire. So you're left, I remember talking to one guy, and he told me, and I started telling him about, oh yeah, I got sober and we can help you. And he told me, Chris, honestly. And the way he's saying it in Sheng, he's saying, mi niko na miaka 35. Nilidrop toka chuo at standard 4. So you're telling me I stopped doing this, and then what? And I did not have an answer for that. Yeah, I did not have an answer for that, because that's where now for me the society needs to check in. But I know maybe I'm going ahead of my yeah, so with the families react differently, because like Carol said, anything can trigger addiction, anything. And therefore, even reactions can be the same. So what we do is storytelling. Let's hear that story, like that question about attachment styles. Let's hear that story of where you're coming from. What are your circumstances? And then let's see how we can help you start on a journey of life that works for you. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chris. Identifying that different families, different people will have specific uniqueness into what contributed to their use. But also the presence of the use would make different family members adjust differently. And for you, your sister, just moving away and disconnecting was a way of adjusting.
And it was
that
really
hurt
annoying.
you, because you needed to connect with her. And you see, even her, she's trying to continue with life, because this is chaos that has been introduced. There's someone that you have mentioned who decided to be the three wheels of pushing the car, and that's your mom. And a lot of times we will have those people who, on one hand, they're not giving up on the person who is using. But on the other hand, in their not giving up, they're kind of enabling the addiction. Maybe tell us a bit about that. Do we have, in the name of love, families encouraging their loved ones to continue using drugs or getting deeper into addiction?
Well, I don't like that word personally, enabling, because it sounds like you're empower. It has a positive connotation or an intentional connotation, because it's harming. But I get where you're coming from, and I know a lot of families, especially addiction intervention. I mean, a lot of families, in my experience, especially when they have a loved one in rehab, they go for those family sessions and they are told, you're enablers. And then they look at themselves and they say, how did I do that? What do you mean? So I think that they didn't know better. Let me give you again another, because I love stories. 2 years ago, I was on TV on a show, I mean, we're talking about addiction, especially around men. And I talked about the same thing, that we don't, in our profession, we try not to use the word enabling a lot more and say maybe harming. And my mom called, and a few days later she said, oh yeah, I watched that show and I just want to say I'm sorry for enabling your drink. I said, but I said we don't use. Then something told me, this is her phone call, this is not mine, is just to sit and listen. And she said, I'm so sorry for doing the things I did, for making the choices. And for me, I already had done the work, that there was actually nothing to forgive, because I got, like now, Carol, I went into the history and saw some of what influenced the decision she made at the time. That now for me, if I repeated the same choices, then now for me, it's now deliberate, harming of my child. And in that phone call, and it was really touching and moving, because I was 25 years sober when that phone call came. Now you can imagine, if I was waiting for that phone call, if I was waiting for my mom to say, I would have died of wait. I mean, I'd have gotten tired, and the beauty, when that phone call came, I wasn't waiting for it. You get? So it helped us, because now we are really great friends, not because of that phone call, but because of this recovery journey. And also family. Another thing, one time I worked in a place where they had a family program. It was a dedicated family program for their own journey, and she was invited to speak. And I was not invited to be in the room when she was sharing. And the facilitators just told me one thing. They said, I'm only going to tell you this one thing. first of all, your mom's share, I've always wanted to know what she said, and now she doesn't remember because it was many years ago. But said nobody asked her. It was the first time somebody was asking her about her side of the story. And we don't do that, especially us as professionals, because even when I was invited for this webinar, I said, why is the burden of recovery on the addict and not the family? I mean, solely on the addict, because that was initially my experience. And I think part of that responsibility should be us, the professionals who deal with both the family of addicts and the addicts, because she said nobody had ever asked her side of the story. And you see, I don't know what that side of the story is, but my mom is just as much a freed woman as I am a freed man now that I'm in recovery. And I'd want to replicate that, every time. And now because of I'm feeling very moved by that experience. Yeah, I replicate that because again, I get people coming to I'm a therapist, so my practice, and they'll tell me I'm looking for a place for my son, for a rehab for my son, or they're coming and telling me my son had a relapse and he was in rehab, and then when I interrogate, there's this practice of when somebody is admitted into rehab, they are told, you can't see him for a month. Yeah? You can't see him for a month. But the family are not told what to do with themselves for that 1 month. Yes, there's relief. At least there's no drama for 1 month. We can breathe. We can even sleep with our doors unlocked because we know nothing is happening. There's temporary, but it's temporary. But it needs dealing with. So we don't tell family what to do with themselves, so that even as Carol said about her family recovering with her, I think theirs is the outlier than the norm. I think we should normalize that recovery process for family.
Thank you very much, Chris, for even giving a bit of more personal information on how your use impacted your mom, and even, many years later, a realization of some of the things she may have done out of kindness, out of needing to support you as a son to get better, or out of the strained relationship, you may not have gone into that may need reconciliation. So telling us when we are looking at addiction as a family disease, we need to also look at the family as a unit, because they may have contributed to the addiction, but at the same time, they also need to heal. They need to deal with the resentments that they have, the chaos that you caused in their life, the blood pressure that shot when you are addicted, the sleepless nights because they don't know where you are. So a responsibility, for practitioners to know that the families need to truly be involved, to even understand what is going on with their loved one. How will the recovery process look like? And at this point, while at it, allow me to invite Carol. Carol, for you just to share with us, even as we are supporting the family, what are the things that the family need to know about their loved one struggling with addiction? What are the things that, as practitioners, because now you belong to both ends, that we can do to support these families?
I think first and foremost, families normally struggle with the idea of their loved one having an addiction, because they're like, how can it be? How can it be my family? How can it be my son? How can it be my daughter? Many years back, it was always family, so-and-so is the one who has a drinking problem. It was more of a drinking problem than a drugging problem. But now, alcoholism is almost in every family. I mean, look at your circles. Everybody almost every family has somebody. So we need to come to that realization that just because you have somebody who is struggling with alcohol or substance in your family doesn't make you the worst family on the planet. Okay. Unfortunately, it has become something very common. It is not right, but it is not common. And as a family, it would be easier and it would be it would be quicker for the one in question to get their recovery journey started if we embraced this person. It is easier said than done, but I think families have tried everything else. You have jailed your daughter or your son or your spouse or whoever, you have taken them to jail. I know some who have even taken their loved ones to the morgue because they blacked out. So when they wake up in the morgue, they wake up and find they are in a place they should not be. I have seen people who've been tied up and put in cow sheds. It has not worked. Now it is time to change the narrative and swallow the bitter pill, sit with this loved one, because I am assuming prior to them beginning this journey of alcohol or substance use, you used to be a family. You are knit together. You used to talk about stuff. Now this person has gone off the railroad. But does that mean you segregate them and cast them out and decide you'll never have anything to do with them? It doesn't justify anything. If anything, it makes the situation worse. So as a family, embrace this person. Try as much as you can to work as closely as you can. If you as a family member, as a mom or as a dad or a sibling, you're finding it is beyond you. You do not have the grace period for that. May you kindly look for somebody in the closer knit circle of the family who can have a conversation, mark my words, a conversation and not a confrontation with this person. You should not beat somebody who is already down. And by the way, when we were in addiction, we already knew we were down. Just because you'd see us smiling or trying to look good or being obnoxious or being rebellious in nature, deep down, we knew we were already down. So as a family, it beats the purpose of you beating us lower than we already are. I always believe it would have been easier. For me, my dad really walked this journey. My God, may God bless that man with a long life. My father really walked with me throughout this journey. Even when others had said this chick should be gone, when people had seen I should be buried in Langata, he stood with me. There always should be that one person in the family who will walk with this one. And by walking with this one, it does not mean that you fund their lifestyle. Alcoholics and substance users or anyone struggling with any form of addiction, we are brilliant here. We know how to get money, even from the dry rock. We will get it. So just because you're working with your person who is in addiction or active use does not mean you enable their lifestyle. What does that mean? If the person had a bill in the bar that they were unable to pay, they better find a way to sort it out. You were not there with them when they were drinking. Let them find a way to sort it out. Do not go out of your way to sort out the pay bill for the liquor store or for the bar. If your person has been locked for their house, not because bad luck happened, but it's because they drank their rent, let them take care of that issue on their own. As a family, you need to bring in the aspect of what we call tough love. I will love you, but I will love you from afar. I will love you, but I will not be tolerant of your bad behavior. As a family, we will love you, but we have set boundaries. I will not let you cross this boundary. You come to my house dead drunk. If you know it's going to happen, please don't come. You have bills to pay. You have a family to take care of. As you walk through your addiction journey, you need to remember you have children, you have a family, you have bills. As an institution, for those of us who are therapists, when the families come to us, because they come saying, help my son, but even you as the father, as the mother, as a significant other, you also need help. I think it's time we took it up as an initiative for ourselves, which is something I personally do. As a family, you come to me and say, you really stigmatize that person that you've brought, asking for referrals to rehab. This person is bad. They have been jailed. They have been done. You name, yani, you give that person, you castigate that person. You castigate that person to the point of you make the therapist wonder, is this one of you? And yet the fact remains, this is one of you. So as therapists, it's time we started talking to the family as a unit, because even them, they need therapy. They should be in recovery also. They have gone through hell and high waters as a result of what their loved one is going through. Because remember, this loved one will eventually leave rehab and go back to that same home. And many reasons, one of the reasons why people relapse is because the support system is zero. The person in question went into treatment, got treated, was given life skills, came out, but went back to the same toxic, dysfunctional, highly suspicious family setting because his family members refused, first and foremost, to accept that they could be contributing factors into why this person became who they became. And then you even refuse to go for therapy because you feel this is beyond you. Family members, for those of you who are on this platform, you need to embrace your loved one who is struggling. There's somebody who's asking a question. What about a family completely refuses to come in for their clients? I think that's the worst thing you can do. Because when this person comes out of rehab and comes back home, where do you want this person to go? And when this person relapses, the first thing you will tell them is, I told you so. We knew it. We were waiting. It was just a matter of time. But you refuse to go to the rehab facility because you're thinking this does not concern you. And yet you're the person who is suffering from high blood pressure. You're the person who is waking God at 3 in the morning. Not that it's bad to pray at 3, but you're crying to God about your loved one. And yet when you're told to go to the facility to speak, you don't want to go and open up your heart. So who is helping who? And so as a family, you continue in this cycle. You are all addicted. Now, in fact, you're not infected. You're addicted because you're addicted to your loved one's poor choice of lifestyle. So as a family, it is time. Stop burying your heads in the sand. We must address this elephant in the room. And as therapists, we need to involve the family members as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol, for such insightful input in terms of the families and what the families need to do. This just reminds me of when we say bring the loved one closer, let there be that person that stands with the loved one. There's this quote that says that the opposite of addiction is connection. So having that one very person in the family that connects with you. But then, if the family is sick and they have their loved one who is sick, then how do we break this cycle? How do we untangle ourselves from all these chaos? Yes, Chris, over to you.
Remember, like I said, we train for so many things. It looks like there needs to be even, family re-education. And again, it's also like now on us practitioners. Let me give you a case where I was called by a family about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a parent and the siblings and about another sibling who was not present in that meeting. And I sat with this family for about 3 to 4 hours. And at the end of the conversation, or at the end of that 4 hours, one of the things they pointed out was, one of the persons pointed out, he said, we haven't talked like this for ages. Actually, we haven't, because it's like now they were on the same page about something that they had not even talked about. So I followed up about 2 or 3 weeks later, because one of the things when I'm going into a intervention, I usually ask, what would you like at the end of this conversation? And, normally would be this person to go to rehab. And the way I start the conversation is, what is your concern? What's your concern about this person's behavior and person's choices? And it sounds very simplistic, but really they had like permission to share their concerns. And then I validate the concerns and I say, yeah, those are valid concerns, regardless of whether, in other spaces they'll be told, how can you judge your son? How can you judge your brother? How can you judge your sister or your, whoever it is, or even a parent? So when I called after 2 weeks, I asked them, oh, okay, I thought we had a goal, that one of the possible goals was to take this person to rehab. They said, Chris, what you did for us was that you got us talking among ourselves, and we hadn't done that. Now, in my view, it's that example of them leaving that car and getting a new one. And because it's still, even if it's a basic unit of society, family is a basic unit of society, it's still made up of individuals. Yeah. So if a family refuses, I think it's still upon us to, because first of all, families are the ones who look for rehabs. They're the ones who do the, the circuit. They're the ones who pray, if there's something like that. They're the ones who, like when I was an administrator in a rehab facility, so the families would come and maybe their person would follow 6 months later, but you can tell this is not the only facility. We've given them the information. Now, for us practitioners, there's this ethical thing that we use about confidentiality and boundaries. So the person is abated, but now I can't deal with the family members all of a sudden because confidentiality. And yet, I feel, I used to get baffled as an administrator. I said, but they're the ones who are paying. They're the ones I'm calling to, to pay for the bills. How come they're not being helped? And they're the ones who came and we sat with them for hours. So I feel that, to answer that question in terms of the burden and now even as a practitioner, the burden I've seen that, yes, that was my journey of taking on recovery for the things that were really not even in my say, the gender I was born in, the country I was born in. So there were things that were not in my control. So even with family, oh yeah, there's another thing I wanted to mention about denial. Now, denial, the way we interpret it in the English way of using it is like refusal. They're refusing to deal with reality. But denial is such a powerful aspect of addiction, and it's not refusing, it's inability. So some of the silly and stupid things and choices I made when I was drinking were not because, first of all, I had a choice or I had a freedom of choice. No, I was in bondage. Yeah. And so when family, even if they refuse to come to answer that question, when they refuse, I'd work with them at their level. It just means it's a longer engagement and say, okay, that's fine, you're not coming. However, this is what is likely to happen if you don't engage. So, and then again, because like we've been talking about the unique circumstances of each family. So denial is an inability to deal with reality. So what rehab does is not to get somebody to stop drinking. It's not somebody to get somebody to stop. It's for the job of rehab professionals, and it's multifaceted. Then it's not just one, it's not even just psychologists, but it's to break that denial. Then the addict has a real choice, perhaps for the first time in their adult life, to say, okay, actually, the way my life has been going, it's not working. And I'd like to work it, but I may not know how to do it, but I want to change. So even family, we need to present them the same data and show them the impact of the addiction, not the addict, of the addiction on them. Yeah, on them and the way they're operating. So like now I asked a sibling that, because and this is about 2 or 3 years later, I asked him the other day, by the way, what happened? Said, no, we moved on. We moved on. And it was said with so much finality that, Chris, don't ask me any questions, do not, whatever, we are fine. And to me, that intervention was successful. Even though the addict was left out, is not part of the journey.
Thank you very much, Chris, for those insightful inputs that you're giving us. And I like how you came in to talk about, the aspect of communication and the importance of that communication, and having families as well as the person who is having addiction to explore on the personal impact and the impact as a family before they can breaking into the cycle of change. And that tells us as practitioners, we need to involve families. This is a very good conversation, and I think because of the reality that Chris and Caroline are bringing into this conversation, we can go on. And I like the questions that people are sharing on the chat. We'll be looking at the questions and also having opportunity to ask questions also to our wonderful speakers here. But As we are breaking that cycle, there is the impact that comes. And Carol, you identified being a female who is in recovery from SUD. And probably you can tell us, how is it for being a female, and how do you break the cycle, and how is recovery like for families that have to deal with a female struggling with addiction? Carol?
I like to use my story as an example. I'm not the SI unit, but I think I don't know, I've been able to help a lot of people by just giving my personal insights on the same. For me, I know I struggled in more ways than one. I had mentioned a bit earlier that I remember missing my menses for a whole year, 12 months straight. I was not sexually active. I was not on contraceptives. My periods just stopped. And this is as a result of my seriously heavy drinking of vodka, to be precise. And now, as a lived experience, and as a woman who speaks a lot about women who are struggling with this thing, I know the shame and the stigma that is attached to many women. For me, as Caroline, I broke that shame and stigma early by coming out and sharing my story, only for me to realize that I was not alone, and that there are so many families that have been crippled by this, more so when it is their daughters or their mothers or their wives who are struggling and they don't know who to share with, because this is Africa. We don't talk about this thing. It is still the elephant in the room. And like I said, a lot of women are drinking now post-COVID. And drinking also resulted in me having 2 miscarriages back to back. At some point in my life, the baby, the fetus is just couldn't hold because of my excessive amount of drinking. And that's why it affects women in ways that it doesn't affect men. I mean, you can imagine by the time a woman is not bathing, you don't shower, you just use roll-on, you don't go to work, you don't brush your teeth, you don't clean the house. You're a parent. I think it's easier when you're single, you have no children, you have no responsibilities. But when you're a woman who has responsibilities and obligations that you're supposed to be carrying out, fulfilling, but you're unable to because of the predicament that you have either got yourself into or you have found yourself in, it becomes crazy. And for parents who have alcoholic daughters, it's something on another level. And more so if you're church-going parents, because people know your child has a drinking problem, your daughter specifically. You know, when it's the boy child, it's easier to get away with it. But when it is your daughter who has a drinking problem, their parents, especially the mothers, become the laughing stock of the church. You are talked about in silent conversations in what is called holy gossip. Yeah. And we need to break. I'm so passionate about breaking this narrative and this stigma, because I have seen it work for me. I know that as a woman in recovery, it is possible to break the chains and the bondages, like Chris has called them. It is possible to break the bondages. And so for me as Carol, I speak for myself and many others who I have walked this journey with, and they have successfully recovered, that it takes a deliberate change of mindset. I don't know how to emphasize that. Your mindset is your game changer. If there's anything you'll take home from me today, is that your mindset is your game changer. It doesn't matter what trauma you have gone through. It doesn't matter what life has thrown at you. What matters is, who do you want to be today? Who do you want to be tomorrow? You need to reach a point where you're uncomfortable in your discomfort. But unfortunately, many people who are tied and are bound by any sort of addiction become comfortable in their discomfort. And that is why you'll find somebody relapse after relapse. And you know, with the first relapse, it becomes shameful. Like me, when I relapsed, I could not believe it. I'm telling you, I had seen it coming, but I couldn't believe it. So for me to find myself in rehab the second time, involuntarily, that for me was a wake-up call. And in between that, I had lapses. Oh my God, I had so many. But you know what? With every lapse, it becomes like something so casual. it's like something you can just wake up and decide, okay, fine, today I'm going to lapse, I'm going to be okay. But you need to reach that point where you decide enough is enough. You become uncomfortable being uncomfortable and decide to make things move. For me as Caro, I am also a partaker of prayer. I believe strongly in the power of prayer, and that has worked for me in more ways than I can even express on this platform. So women really do face this stigma, and that is why you'll find few women coming out. I remember when I shared my story on, I think, Lynn Ngugi's platform about how women are struggling with this thing. I had a lot of females who got into my inbox, and some of them are in very senior corporate positions, but they cannot go and see a therapist because they do not want the therapist's record to show in their work file. You see, because going to see a therapist is shameful. But the point of the matter is a lot of women are struggling with this thing. A lot of women are carrying alcohol in their handbags to work. And if you have a good job, you buy expensive vodka because it does not smell. And so you take it with your 10 o'clock tea. And so the person who entered the office at 8 looking like they'd been rained on, after 10:30 tea, they're as happy and as go-lucky as something else because they have worked on the feel-good hormone in the brain called dopamine. And so for women, if we do not deal with this problem now, if we don't stop burying our heads in the sand, it's going to destroy our next generations. I can already see it coming. The numbers are alarming. They are alarming. And unless we speak about it unashamedly and openly, it's going to bite us.
I like the emphasis that you're putting on, Carol, about being uncomfortable in discomfort, being tired and being sick and tired of being sick and tired, and turning around. And even as families, when confronting denial, that they must want it, they must see it, that it's damaging and it's destroying them, that somebody can go to whatever treatment facility, but until the person owns the process to know that I'm making this change for me, until family realize that my son, my daughter, my husband is struggling and stop burying their head in sand, that this person needs help, as a family we need help, then the problem of addiction will keep on circling back. And some unique dynamics you're bringing there about women being closet drinkers and not wanting to be identified. In your way of dealing with stigma, what I'm getting is that is allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, families to being vulnerable, to say that we are struggling. My son is struggling with addiction. I have struggled with this condition and I'm trying to get help. That voice, that vulnerability that people can expose themselves to. And that is one of the opportunity to get people in the cycle of recovery. As we get to allow people to ask questions, Chris, there's something you mentioned, and then now we can invite people for questions. There's something that you mentioned about families needing help. Families, as their loved one going to treatment, that rehabilitation facilities are missing out on the first 1 month. What should families do? What would you advise families when their loved one is going into treatment? What should you advise treatment programs on things that they can engage the families?
To start talking, you see, conversations is the access to miracles, and vulnerability also. To just start saying where they are at, share their frustrations, share, even if you want to say haka kamkora, yeah, start with, that's your experience of this person's using, even if they're your son, yeah, because let's because there's a lot of stereotypes that we operate in as if they're truth, but they are stereotypes. So start talking. Start talking. Even when we are talking about, like that question about blaming the wife for, start there. Start saying you're the one who gives him money and then he goes and drinks. And then now, but on the other end, this person is not being, maybe the father is not giving, is playing hands off, and the child wants to connect with their father. Yeah. So that's also problematic, So, and also, for us as practitioners to demystify therapy. I think this week is when KDT has come out, either this week or the week before. Now that KDT, as much as a KBZ or whatever, will still be, the owners know that they need to service that car after 5,000 kilometers. And like I'm saying, we invest so much in so many things except the things that we need. The soul work is fundamental as far as I'm concerned. So that let's demystify therapy as like now for me, even if somebody is coming for 2 sessions, I make sure that, like that thing of those 2 sessions, there'll be a breakthrough. Not I make sure, but that's my goal, that there'll be a breakthrough in those 2 sessions. So I don't look at the clock, because that's another thing, and I don't charge extra. Yeah. So is there a loss? For me, a better Kenya, a better family is better for Kenya. So and then again, the genograms are not just for looking for patterns of maladjustment and impairments and things that are not working. But you can also
Maybe, Chris, as you speak, you can speak like you're speaking to these families that are listening, because here is it's a combination of professionals and even the families. Now speak to that family. They need help. Where do they begin?
Yes.
How do they go about?
How do they? Yeah. So there are many spaces. A lot of faith-based organizations are starting to talk. There's the social media platforms. They have even family groups, even on their own WhatsApp groups. Just like I said, vulnerability is a good black spot for miracles to happen. Yes, also judgment will happen in that vulnerability space, yeah? But being judged for a life that's already not working will not make that life worse, yeah? So get help, reach out and a lot of therapy, what they're doing, what we do, for instance, I open up for the first consultation, a 30-minute conversation. We've said so much in 2 hours. So you can imagine for 30 minutes, I won't charge you for that. Just come and say what's going on with you, what's going on with the family, what's going on, and then we'll direct you. Rehabs, I would recommend that family program also be intentional. Okay, you may not have inpatient for families, not on this part of the world anyway, but let's be intentional. Have a program strictly for families and not for them to talk. Not to be given that msomo, because many of them complain to me that it's msomo, tulisomewa vile wa enablers, and also acknowledge, remember that it's, just to acknowledge where you're at and say, this is not working. And then we work from there. So no pretense, no madoidos, and not just even families, because like now, if there's a question about the corporate, let's familiarize even the corporate sector, because people are spending a third of their lives in the workplace. Yeah. So let's deal with even that that corporate setup as part of this person's family. Yeah. So yes, there's issues I know of confidentiality, but already the messes are not confidential. People are not coming to work. They're not coming to work. They're not contributing to the team. Yeah. So already stuff is out there in the open. So for me, one of the things of demystifying addiction is that it's no different for somebody who's in hospital for getting a bout of malaria. We don't go and slap somebody telling them, stop shaking, what's wrong with you? No, we treat them with compassion. So families, we can train you how to love your addict to death. Yeah. But also where you take care of yourself. There are times I say, I'm not seeing you again until you've done a pedicure, you've done your hair. If it's a wife, you've gotten yourself a new dress, things like that.
Thank you, Chris. And again, emphasizing the need of having people being honest with themselves and having conversations and being vulnerable about it. One of the things that I'm hearing you mention for families is for them to know there is help out there. People like you, other people who are in the practice, they are available to listen with compassion and non-judgmental, you know, not really judging them for having a loved one with addiction. So there are safe spaces, there's professional help where they can get, and it's not just about the money. The focus is about healing. Allow me to open this for the participants to just ask questions, and going straight to Anne. I'll be picking questions based on hands that have been raised, as well as also reading questions that have been posted in the chat. Some of them, as we've continued in the chat, we've responded to them. So keep on sharing the questions. We will answer as many as possible. And I will take a question from Anne, and also a question from Wesley. And I would be having you, either Chris or Caroline, take the question, whoever would feel ready to take the question, or if the person who is asking is specific on who they would want to hear a response to ask. So Anne, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, good evening. Limo and Caroline, thank you for the good presentation. A lot of learning happening. My concern is, and I just want to be practical. We have a young man who has been drinking for quite some time. And because he did not want, of course, those small restrictions in the house of drinking and all that, and being also growing to an adult, moved out of their house, eventually living with a girlfriend who is also drinking. So for a long time, the family has been trying to talk the young man into leaving the particular behavior. And at one time they sat the two with their relatives, and then they were encouraging them to separate for a while, not to discourage the relationship, but at least to separate, because the young girl has just finished her internship in law, and the other young man was also has also finished university. So they both are not working, but somehow the girl gets a rent from a relative to pay the house, but this young man is not working, but they are not willing to separate. So the problem with the concern with the family is not a problem, is how to separate the two. Or is it to force them to go? They are not yet willing to go to a therapist. They are saying, the girl is saying she has once been in a rehab. It never works. It doesn't work. And the young man is just there, not having been taken to a therapist, went for 2 days or 2 times and stopped. So it's like now where the family feels stuck. They don't know what to do next. Do they force the young man to go to the rehab? So that is the concern. How do you work around 2 people who are drinking seriously? They are all graduates, although the level doesn't matter. Yeah, how do you help them? The family are sat with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. Chris, you'd like to take that question? On what should the family do? How can these 2 young persons be helped?
Okay, or maybe we could also consider taking a bunch of questions that may be related. But first of all, something that my father-in-law, and I'm so grateful for that, meeting him, even at 44, he told me that an adult is somebody who can take care of themselves and who can take care of another. It's not necessarily somebody who's over 18. That's a GOK construct. So it sounds to me like these 2 people cannot take care of each other, cannot take care of themselves, so they are not adults. And if there's a legitimate need being met by them being together, let's interrogate, what is that need? Is there acceptance? Is there love that they're not getting? So for me, I'd still have more information. I'd want more background information from the family, even if it's more than 1 session. Because ultimately, like Carol said, when somebody, even if they go to rehab, they're coming back home. So what home are they coming back to? So let's see what's wrong with the car first, before we start dealing with the occupants. So for me, I would have more information. I'd want more information from the family, and just even that history taking and that kind of, the genogram and finding out the patterns.
Right. Thank you, Chris. We can take a question from Emily and Emma. Sorry, not Emily, but Wesley and Emma.
Just before I was asking, is it proper to force such now to a rehab or sort of talk to them to a rehab?
Yeah, okay. There's things were ground in terms of involuntary admission and voluntary admission. From even my thesis, I did family dynamics and on recovering alcoholics. Majority of the people who were involuntarily admitted into rehab did not work. You know, all of the ones who are in fact, 100% of those who are involuntarily, and professionally, involuntary admission is really when somebody is at danger of harming themselves or harming another. But this, again, it's maybe it's Kenya, I don't know about other places, but involuntary admission is, you know, is the majority of the clients. So there's an economic issue there. But so forcing people to go doesn't, in my view, work, especially the first time. Have a conversation and share the concern. And even we come and moderate, say, what is your concern? Then I ask the addict, have you had that concern? This person needs help this person needs help, you to help them deal with their concern about you. Do you have something to say? They might say, Shidao. Then now you have permission as family, you know, direct permission from the addict to do what you need to do to get the car moving.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that input. And the more you are explaining about it, the need to have the voluntary admission of getting into treatment, the more I feel the need to have persons who are able to engage the families, persons who are able to engage the individuals or the person struggling with addiction, such that they can start gaining insights on why therapy is important, why they can start gaining insight on why they need to get into treatment. So a lot more conversation to be held. I know in addiction treatment, a lot of times people ride on it. It doesn't have to be voluntary for it to be effective. And Carol has shared her own example that in the second time she went into treatment involuntarily, but it took a point of her realizing she needs to make a change for herself. So in saving a lot of cost, it helps for people to realizing that I'm doing this for me, not doing that for my mother, not doing that for anybody else, in order to be able to make the change. But that at times can be a very dicey conversation that families feel that if we don't get you into treatment, you're losing your life. You're wasting your years. So having persons to intervene, having persons to have an initiation of such conversations can help families also, as you're saying, to know what direction to really take and know that the decision to change is anchored squarely on the person that is using. Thank you so much. Let me get questions from Wesley, then Emma, and then David, and then we can combine the three of them to be responded.
Yeah, thank you.
And keep on sharing and talking about the questions on the chat.
Sure. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Wesley.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you so much, Caroline, and also Chris, for this forum. So my question goes to Chris. I know of this family, they have this son, and the son is really, really into alcohol, and the son is working. So apparently the parents are really, really so much concerned about their son. And one of the counselors actually recommended a rehab for this son of theirs. But now there seems to be an issue whereby this son of theirs is working. And so the family, together with the son, actually, they are really, really scared that the son might lose their job, and they don't even know how to approach it. Like, they don't know how to approach the employer to really explain that their son needs help in terms of alcoholism. So what do you do about this? Like, what approach do you do this to make sure that the son is not losing their job? Yeah, because you see, like now in Kenya, it's so hard to get a job, to be honest, just like how Chris was mentioning, it's so hard to be a Kenyan. Yeah, and so jobs really come not so easily, and so they don't want the son to lose a job, and this son of theirs is really working in a very high paying kind of a job. So my question is, what approach should this family get to use in order to approach this employer of of their son to allow them to allow the son to get into a rehab for the 3 months that is recommended, and then perhaps get back after the son has gone through treatment. So thank you so much for allowing me to ask the question. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Wesley. Let's hold and get to hear Emma's questions before the questions can be responded. Emma?
All right.
Thank you very much, Chris, Carol, and to you, Catherine. So my question is, it involves a bit of dynamics. The client is somebody who's been battling addiction for about 3 or 4 years. And then unfortunately, they were diagnosed with bipolar that's induced now by the addiction. And so one of the goals of after the treatment, after discharge from rehab, is to allow these clients go live on their own. And the parents are of the opinion, want this person to be responsible enough. And so my concern is, in such a case, is it safe because it's somebody who's been in rehab once, twice, thrice? Maybe this is the 4th time. And for me, I thought it may not be the best thing, because if they've come home and they relapsed, my concern is when they're living alone, probably without somebody supervising them. Remember, they're also living with another condition, yeah? So what is the best approach to use in such a case? And also when Carol was talking about dynamics, I think also the family dynamics also contribute to the progression. Either relapse or full recovery, because every home is unique, every family is unique in its own way. And so also as practitioners, also let's put that into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Emma, for that question. I would have Chris respond to Wesley's question on how to approach employers when a loved one is struggling with addiction and there's the fear of losing a job. And then for Carol to talk about the issues of comorbidity and how recovery looks like for people who have not just the addiction, but also having another mental illness and decisions that at times families may make. Over to you, Chris.
Okay. When I did my practicum, the day I joined for my MA, I went into a rehab. The day I joined, somebody came, and there was a client who was admitted on the same day, and I was assigned that client. And by the time they came, it's a family that brought them, but the employer did not know. So we engaged with the employer, and during the course of this person's rehabilitation. However, there was some level the client did not want to go, and which is in their right to, but the employer eventually wrote a letter granting them paid leave for as long as this person needed it. However, because of even the perception of the client, they felt, I still don't want them to know that much. And yet the employer already knows with the absenteeism, with the quality of work, of output. And fortunately, a lot of employers now are embracing addiction and as a disease like any other. There was also resistance even during the HIV days, that you could not openly say, that because you'll be fired, because people were scared of getting, that it would be contagious and that kind of thing. So that conversation at least has started. I know state corporations even have addiction committees, although now I hear because of the austerity measures. So a lot of these questions are also about addiction being a societal scourge. So where does society start taking responsibility, especially given that we've privatized so many public services, healthcare, education, sanitation, and of course now even rehabilitation and all those things. So these are things even as society we need. I don't know where that conversation will start. We can start just your platform or here. So it's a question of where does society come in? Can we do fundraising for somebody to go to rehab? Usually that we will do for, say, I'm sorry to say this, but we'll do for cancer. And at times nowadays we're being told that's also a lifestyle disease, yeah, just as addiction could be. But when we tell somebody, you say, but that's self-inflicted. Insurance companies are now onboarding, paying for rehab. For a long time, I remember we were in that advocacy thing. They say, no, it's self-inflicted. So people would have an accident, even a motor accident, and the, insurance will not settle that claim because they say no. If they were intoxicated, that was self. But if you are having a seizure and you have an accident and even maybe cause a fatality, insurance are likely to pay for that. Yeah. And so they are huge questions. So for this one, I'd rather, we would look at losing his job or losing his life. Because it looks like they will lose their job anyway, they'll be fired, and then they'll get suicidal. And the things that the dynamic that Carol brought up about when you're not now able to sustain yourself.
Thank you, Chris. At times looking at what are the costs on each sides of the coin that the family will have.
Just one more thing about my client. When they were discharged from the rehab, went back to work, they were still assigned a role. On Fridays, they had these socials. The employer allowed for social. So she was still, the client was still assigned the role of buying the alcohol and the yogurt and the juices and they did not know what to do. So the person quit, forgetting. And then by the time they told me they had already resigned, and I said, oh, if we had a conversation, you could have really been reassigned from that, because the employer didn't know this would be a problem. Yeah. But they'd already resigned, and now we couldn't approach the employer again. I thought just to mention that.
Thank you for highlighting that alcohol and drug use has been mainstreamed and it's considered as a health issue, and people have a right to receive treatment for the same. Allow me now to invite Carol to respond on the question about a bipolar client whose family wants them to live independently, and how should the families be able to handle that, and even managing clients post-treatment. What are the things that family should be able to know? Carol, also being a woman in recovery, you can take that, and this other question that has been asked here of families who end up blaming the mother for their child's substance use. In this case, a lot of time, maybe the husband or the extended families, that it's like it's the mother who has failed. Maybe you can also speak into that.
Sorry, I didn't catch you, Catherine. Please say that again. My connection it became strange. The questions, please.
The first question is about a family that has their loved one who was diagnosed not just with SUD, but also with bipolar. And the family wants this person as a way of them becoming independent, to live by themselves, to have their own life. And they feel that that's a helpful support. But she seems to be worried because this person has relapsed over and over again. So in such a case, what should the family do? What should be the best way forward for the family? And you can also expound a bit in just speaking about substance use and the recovery. What should families know about recovery of their loved one, whether it's recovery with the substance use or also recovering with co-occurring condition? And then the second question is by somebody who has asked about families that will blame the mother when their sons or their daughters start having a problem. What kind of insights or encouragement could you give to such, or even speak about that?
I'll start with the question about the mother or the wife who is blamed because of her child who has a use disorder, and clearly they're blaming her because probably she seems to cover up for this boy or for this girl. She's the one, children, boys specifically, run to their moms for money when they know they are in trouble. And so probably the family is rightfully feeling that she's the one who has enabled him. I know Chris hates the word, but I will use it, that they are feeling that the mother is the one who has enabled this boy. Now, instead of castigating this lady any further, now that the situation has reached where it has reached, it is time for whoever feels aggravated by this situation to get this lady to have a conversation with a therapist regarding the same. If it is for real that she is one of the reasons as to why the son has become now an addict, she also needs help, because she has taken the son under her wings. And the worst thing is that many times mothers know that their boys are struggling, but you try and shield them. You don't want to hear that Kababa slept hungry, that Kababa was kicked out of the house because he didn't pay rent. So a mother's natural instinct most of the times is to cover up for her children, but she's only making his situation worse. So this lady, if she's on this platform, she needs to agree to go for therapy. She needs to be able to be vulnerable and open up and speak about the allegations that have been passed toward her. And if it is true that she has been enabling her child to become who he has become today, then it's time to embrace change. Number 2 is about comorbidity. The person who has an alcohol use disorder and also struggles with bipolar or any other condition. As a family, they need to, because they're in recovery, like I said, you're infected or affected, but nowadays we are all in recovery together. It's important for the family and for this person in question to understand the situation. The person in question is struggling with bipolar and an AUD. He needs to understand the magnitude of the situation. Okay, you have bipolar. So people with bipolar should not do this and this and this. You need to walk the person through the health journey that he's on. He also needs to prioritize his treatment and medication. It's important for the family to know that they cannot micromanage their child forever. This person has a life to live. This person has a life to live. Bipolar or AUD or any other addiction are not a death sentence. There is life that must go on. And so this person must be brought to the point of they must understand that they need to prioritize their medication. They need to prioritize their treatment more than any other thing. Because at some point, this person will have to move out of home, start their own family if they have not done it already. This person also has to adopt a healthy lifestyle. And for you to adopt a healthy lifestyle, it means you have to eat properly. Eating properly is not eating junk food. Eating properly is eating a balanced diet so that your body can behave itself and so that your medication and your treatment plan can also work. And by the way, by the time you actually adopt a healthy lifestyle, you have to love yourself. Many people in addiction, and even people currently in recovery, one thing that is lacking from their lives is self-love. You lack self-love. And the reason many people lack self-love is because you've been so bad to yourself, you've been bad to others, you've mistreated yourself, you've mistreated other people. And so inculcating self-love is something very far-fetched for you. But if you're going to start this journey of living well, for you who has a comorbidity, you have to eat well, adapt a healthy lifestyle, eat well, exercise. Exercise does not mean running or gymming. You can also take walks, nice walks, intentional walks, okay? They clear your mind, they clear your heart, they clear your system, all right? And sleep. By the way, sleep is not for the wicked, and it is not for the weak either. Inculcate sleep in your lifestyle, okay? Sleep well, sleep at a good time. Don't watch a horror movie and then you say you're going to sleep, okay? You will just accelerate and aggravate every other thing you're going through in your life. You need to manage your mental health. What does managing your mental health mean? Managing your mental health also means saying no. No, ladies and gentlemen, is a complete sentence. Saying no to relationships that do not add value, saying no to content on your phones that are not bringing value, like pornography, gambling, betting, watching horror movies. Okay, I have a problem with horror movies. Your mental health is important. What do you watch before you go to sleep? What do you listen to first thing when you wake up? Who are the kind of people you interact with? Do you give out negative energy? And do you bring in negative energy? Like Chris mentioned, Kenya is a difficult place, man. Being a Kenyan is something that needs to be put in the Guinness Book of World Records. But now that we are here, you need to manage your mental health, selfish with your values, selfish with your time, loving you, and refusing to accept anything less. You need to build a support system, a strong support system. You need to bring people around you who understand your journey. If you know you have an underlying, a pre-existing condition, can you look for people who you know will work with you and they'll not judge you? They'll not stigmatize you. You know, they'll not talk about you at, oh, this Carol suffers from bipolar, so we need to treat her in a certain kind of a way. Bring people into your space that you know are going to work with you deliberately on this journey, okay? And you need to also monitor your symptoms. What triggers your bipolar? It's not your bipolar. What triggers the bipolar? Like for me, I don't have bipolar, but I have had an alcohol use disorder. And so I also have to monitor myself. What are my triggers? What would make me go back to drinking? What would make me relapse? And so for anybody who has bipolar and an AUD or any other pre-existing condition, you need to do a mental evaluation, like literally every day. Initially, it's difficult, so you have to do it every hour. Like for me, I'm very cognizant of the fact that I have to be in tune with my emotions on the daily. I know when I get upset, I can tell what has made me upset. And if I continue with that line of thought, chances are I will end up in a place that I don't want to be. And so as the family of this person in question, you need to come together and have a beautiful family meeting and pour your love on this person. Help them understand that you love the person. You may not know how to love this person, but this is where prayer and therapy comes into play, where you seek for advice and help from sources outside of yourself to know how you're going to work in tandem with this person, because this person has to move out of home at some point. Otherwise, they will become luggage and baggage that you're not ready to carry for the rest of your lives. I hope I've answered that question, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Carol, for the more helpful insights that you're giving our audience. We were supposed to stop this webinar at 7 p.m. Clearly, the issue of families, the issues of addiction being a family disease, and the societal aspects that are connected to the family are conversations that we need to have more often. We have plenty of questions and feedback that we have on the chat, acknowledging everybody who has been able to raise the questions on the chat, give feedback on the chat on family needing to find support for themselves, talking about issues like Al-Anon that are present, a conversation that we need to have about issues of attachment. Chris, you are passionate about issues of parenting, and you know families are significant and important. Issues of other addictions, that not just talking about alcohol and drug use, that could be disconnecting people from reality, disconnecting people from families. The intention was to end the webinar at 7:20. David, sorry, I forgot to pick your question. Kindly, audience, allow me to pick David's question and then invite Carol and Chris as they respond to David's question to give their closing remarks.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine, Carol, and my friend Chris. My question goes to Carol or anyone who can answer. I heard Carol say that her recovery was geared toward emotional feeling when she got relapse. So here comes a family where their loved ones, when they go back to relapse, they are not emotional, and the family may have spent a lot of resources trying to help this person. So, and they're feeling that their loved ones, it's their personal fault. They're not understanding that this is a disease. So, how can you encourage a family that has gone such a process so that they can continue helping their loved ones? Because at times they say they are given up, they feel this is too much, they are unable to handle. So how can you help this family to understand even them now they are sick? Thank you. Back to you, Catherine.
I think partly that question was answered in the discussion, but Caro, I allow you to take that question and also give your closing remarks. Then we can move over to Chris. Caro, are you there? If not, Chris, you can take it and also give your closing remarks. Then we cross over to Caro. Chris, I'm not sure what is happening. I can see you're talking, but you're not audible, at least on my end. Bado. Can we hear Chris? Ama ni mimi?
Now is good?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, one of the ways I equip families, it's so simple, is that thing of repeatedly sharing their concern. And the script is, I'm concerned about your well-being. I'm concerned about the choices you're making. I am concerned that, like if I'm concerned that when I don't know where you are, that you will, that whether you're safe. I'm concerned, and you do it over and over. And so the person at times they think, oh, rather than tell them, you need to stop drinking, you need to, because I knew when I was drinking that I was not supposed to, I could see the record, yeah? And the people who came and told me to stop drinking were the ones that it didn't work, until I met this new tribe that didn't even tell me to stop drinking. And I said, but when are you going to do this? And they didn't. Then they invited me into their world. They shared their story. And I said, oh, first of all, there was consolation that I was not alone. And then mine was not special and different, even though that's what I felt. So that thing of sharing your concern and then asking for help from the addict, because at times they're not used to being considered as helpful. So say, how can you help me with my concern? You might be told, go sort yourself, you can niako, but keep repeating that, because that, rather than say, because you see, again, in a broken space of addiction, love cannot necessarily be communicated by saying, I love you. But it can be demonstrated by saying, why is this person still listening to me? Why is this person, and for me, one of the things in terms of the recovery journey, when I went to make amends to my mother, it was 4 years, I was 4 years sober. And because I needed to know that even me, I have changed, I have transformed. So when I'm going to make amends, it might have felt a formality, but really it made even a difference in the shift in restoring that relationship of mother and son. Yeah. And then now giving up any ideas that things should have been different. And that's what forgiveness is. Giving up the idea that things should have been different. Well, they weren't. Yeah. So that's where now we equip families to look at themselves and do the soul work. And because I was asked to do also the parting shot with that response, I hope it answers maybe in a very abstract way. June 25th, 2024, Gen Zs went to the street. And I joined several of the Twitter spaces then, or the X spaces, and those were, by the way, group therapy. I mean, they were really interesting, the ones that went for hours and hours. But there's something that I caught once. One of the Gen Z said, look, we are operating in a situation where my millennial siblings are struggling. I'm in that same space, my parents are struggling. And my parents are looking after their parents. Surely, what's there for me? So part of the thing that's missing, and I feel that would make a difference, is hope. And hope that not just a feel-good hope, but hope like having a webinar like this. That it will make a difference in families, certainly in individuals, but also know that families also can say, I surrender. I don't have more bandwidth than this. And it's okay to admit that I don't have more bandwidth than this. I need more help. And you can never ask for too much help. Unfortunately, things are the way they are in this. So for me, I was honestly, as a Gen X, I was for that revolution. There's a political connotation, but for me, the social aspects of that revolution, they raise new questions. And for me, even being here in the webinar, rather than answer questions, I want us to just provoke new questions about our lives, about where we are coming from and where we want to be, and even pertinently ask the question, what's not working, what's working, and what's missing that if it was present would make a huge difference. Then go for it. I promise the support, the miracle will happen. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, for your insight and for that thought-provoking questions that you leave us to ponder. Caroline?
Okay. Answered.
Your closing remarks?
My closing remarks are that, gosh, we need to have more conversations. I want to encourage
sorry, Caroline,
every family member
you're
who's here who has
breaking.
It may look very ugly and very...
Carol, you're breaking. We can't hear you.
Am I audible now?
Yes, thank you. We seem to have lost Carol.
Am I clear now?
Carol, maybe you can turn off your camera to help improve the bandwidth. On my screen, you're frozen.
Am I clear now?
Yes.
Oh dear. Okay.
As Carol is getting her network sorted, I want to thank all of us for taking time and participating in this conversation. And clearly from the questions that are coming up, from questions of attachment to questions of other addiction, to questions of the family and insights about the family, being as sick as the person that is struggling with addiction is a clear indication, as Chris has given us the task, that we need to really take responsibility. We need to look within and without ourselves and have more of these conversations as families, as a society, as organizations, because the message is, or the reality is, that families are struggling, loved ones are struggling with not just addiction, but various problems. And if we keep the conversation going, we are able to find and get solutions to such problems. Caroline, are you back?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I don't know what, there's something. My parting shot is that it's not over until you win. I want to encourage every significant other of somebody with any sort of addiction that there's always hope. It doesn't matter how many times your person has relapsed. It doesn't matter the magnitude of the problem. I believe Chris and I are testaments and testimonies to the fact that it is possible. So it is difficult for family members to grasp the magnitude of addiction, but prayer changes things and intentional therapy also changes. There's somebody who said they have somebody who has refused to go for therapy. Many people at times refuse to go for therapy because they feel they're being caged, they're being put into a box. And other times people refuse to go for therapy because deep down they know they have a problem, but they don't want it to be put out there publicly. Keep trusting, just keep talking, keep sending videos. I remember my dad started pointing out about my drinking problem 10 years before it actually became as crazy as it became. He would send me for therapy, he would get me people for intervention, he would write me letters, he would do everything. And I was so rebellious to the fact that he's trying to tell me I am sick. I'm not sick. I can control my drinking. I can control my partying, but I had already lost control. But with being deliberate, with you being deliberate in the life of your person who is struggling, change will come. Sometimes even sooner than later. So don't give up. Hold on to faith. Hold on to hope. Keep tuning into webinars. You get more knowledge. You get even more grace. You get more insight, wisdom, and revelation. And with time, things will work out. And remember, it's not over until the person in question wins. Wishing you all a lovely evening.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris Limo and Caroline Kagia. I believe all of us have learned, all of us have gotten insights that we as family members or we as people supporting family members, we can probably do different. Asanteni sana. Let me now hand this over to Sylvia for closing. There are some questions that have been put in the chat and they will be answered before the next webinar, but there are also, probably want to imagine, Sylvia, you have a communication to make, because this is a series of many webinars that are normally offered courtesy of Family Wellness. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for learning. God bless you. Have a good night. Back to you, Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for your moderation. You've really done a good job. Thank you so much, Caroline and Cyrus, for the good insights from our topic today. And thank you also the participants for participating in terms of asking questions and just getting to learn about this topic. I have seen there are some questions that have not been answered. So we always answer the questions that have been unanswered in the upcoming webinar, which will happen, of course, on Saturday, the same time, 5:30 to 7 p.m. That is when we usually hold our webinars. So as our speakers have said that we should enter into such forums to get the understanding and the knowledge about these topics, everyone is invited for such our webinars that we always have them on Saturday. And I would also like to thank the initiator of this webinar, who is Dr. Kimani Githongo. He's really doing a good job in terms of acquiring the best speakers who give us the best knowledge, and even the moderators. Thank you so much, Dr. Kimani. And I think today we've really extended, but it's because of the topic. And I think we will organize on how we can have the same topic in the upcoming webinars so that we can really tackle these matters accordingly. Thank you so much, everyone. And above all, I would like to thank God. And in matters that, let's close with a word of prayer so that we can all enjoy our upcoming Sunday and even the Saturday night. So thank you, Heavenly Father, for the session that we've had about addiction, which is a family disease. We thank you for so much for the knowledge that we have gotten from our speakers and even our moderator and even the participants and even their concerns. How we pray, God, that you may lead each and every one of us according to your will to just build ourselves to better people in the future and even in our society. Thank you for the time that you've given us. Thank you for taking care of each and every one of us. And how we pray that as we are parting, that may you keep us together and may you keep us protected every day. We thank you and we bless your holy name. For it is in Jesus' name I pray, believing and trusting in your holy name. Thank you.
Amen.
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 Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely Saturday evening.
Thank
You
you for
too.
having me. That was a true privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Chris
you. Bye. Good
and
night.
Catherine and Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Today I was in the shadows. I hope everybody can hear me.
Can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. Sylvia, are you there? Or did I remove Sylvia? Oh, Sylvia is there.
Yes, I'm here, Dr.
Okay, and there was another person who has just been admitted. Allow me to remove. Okay, Sylvia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Daktari. Mine, first of all, is to thank Chris and Catherine and Caroline for the great insightful insights from you. It has been really an engaging session. Even the people really turned up so well. I think we just need to discuss on how we can take this discussion further, because how can we have such this webinar? I think we can do that in the planning. Mine is